Good morning, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us here on CricketNext.com. I'm Shivani Gupta from CNN News 18. And it's very, very exciting for us here because we're joined by one of the best batsmen we've seen, playing in the cricket field growing up. Graeme Smith is joining us, but not really as a cricketer alone. He's joining us in his new avatar as SA20 Commissioner, the new South Africa T20 League. Graeme Smith is joining us. He's handling it as the Commissioner. Graeme, thanks a lot for speaking to us this morning.
Shivani, how are you? Morning.
And I'm also joined by Group Editor of the CNN of News 18 Network, Shriniwas Rao, who's been tracking a lot of what's going on in the SA20, isn't it, Srini?
Yes, since the man is here, I have a lot of questions to ask him. So.
We all do. So without further ado, let's just get into it. Before, we talk about the SA20 in detail, Graeme, I'm very curious to understand from you your experience, as a former cricketer who's really, been there, done that. How is it like setting up a league and all the backstage drama, all the stress? What about you? What about your career did you use as the commissioner role? And how have things been in the run-up for you?
Yeah, look, very different to running a cricket team, I guess, which I did for a long time. I think maybe aspects of being a captain, certainly in South Africa, you deal with the sort of leadership boards, different structures, obviously, the sponsors, and then obviously building and running a team. So I think, from a leadership perspective, there's some aspects, but, obviously this is much more focused on the business side of the sport rather than the playing. And it's been a process, I think it's you're consistently learning, and, it's been busy, it's been hectic. We've had to turn this around in, I think, 4 or 5 months from the time that we kind of hit the ground. And we've been fortunate along the way as well that some really key people have backed us and supported the project, which is kind of the biggest stepping stones to getting to where we are for SA20.
Srini and I were talking a little bit about what questions we're going to throw you. And one of the things that we really wanted to ask you was, for a league to be successful and for it to be balanced and for it to make sense for the viewers, especially in an age where there's so many T20 leagues to watch, the distribution of talent becomes very important amongst the teams, isn't it? So what is it that the SA20 did to ensure that before Srini also comes in of, what, for example, the IPL does or did and how other leagues look at it? Graeme?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think it's a perfect science. I think, the objective being in the league is to try and create a platform that keeps the entire league competitive. I think the worst thing is probably 4 or 5 years in, if you've had one team that's won everything and the cricket is not exciting. I think that for us would be a disappointment. So, we want the cricket to be great. So if I think back to 2008, playing for the Royals, I mean, I think we were sort of the laughing stock after 2 games into the IPL, and we ended up going on and hammering everybody and never lost another game and won the tournament. So it's difficult to predict these things. Teams click. Sometimes the dynamics work. A couple of players hit form. So, you look around. I mean, there's MI looking incredible at the moment with their bowling attack. But it's for us, it's about having a competitive league. We want to get, games that are going down to the last over that people are, enthralled to watch, some new heroes. And we spoke yesterday about a number of unearthing new talent and new storylines. I think that is something that I'm really looking forward to in South African cricket.
Srini?
Yeah. Graeme, one of the things that I think, worked so wonderfully, not just for IPL, but, I think it set a trend of sorts in the business of leagues. When what BCCI did back in 2008 was ensure that nobody has an advantage on the spending bit, like everybody gets an equal opportunity to spend, and there's a cap on what you're going to kind of. I think what that allowed was a bit of a balance as against what we've seen in some of the football leagues in Europe and in UK, where you earn $100 and you can only spend $100. You cannot spend $101 unless you're earning it. So what do you make of that, and the fact that things should also always start at a very at a very basic level and then allow it to grow? What are your views on that?
Yeah, so Shrini, I mean, you're 100% correct, and we really tried hard to get that right in the beginning. Especially, from a league perspective, season one was unique because we were building it and signing players at the same time. I think one thing that was really challenging in the marketplace was the competition for players, and to secure the big talent. And we knew that was going to be important for, in particular, the first couple of seasons. So, getting the likes of a Rashid Khan, Liam Livingston. So the league centrally went out while we were building it and signed, a lot of top class players. And then for us, I guess getting the pre-signing structure right was important to balance those books. How that was going to affect the salary caps going into the auction. How did people spend and balance it out? So you saw in the auction, that. The Sunrisers and the Capitals came in with a very big purse. They didn't use much of their pre-signing, and it was interesting to watch. The Sunrisers went for a very local, built a team that's very Eastern Cape based, a lot of homegrown talent. Obviously, they went after Stubbs, which probably disappointed MI in the end. But I think there's some nice little storylines in all the teams that have balanced the squads nicely.
Graeme, what do you think is the outcome that you're looking at, especially from the point of view of South African cricket? What do you hope this league is able to do for South African cricket? Because there are concerns sometimes over T20 leagues, and we'll delve into them in just a bit. But just purely from what it can give back to South African cricket at the grassroots level, what are your hopes?
So Shivani, I think if we, let's be honest. I mean, South Africa needed to develop a product that it could make its own. I think commercially it needs to be viable. It needs to, bring some gravitas back to South African cricket. It needs a product that they can own and not be reliant on ICC grants or, all these sort of bilateral challenges that are challenging the marketplace. And South Africa's kind of just moved off the radar as a really powerhouse cricketing nation. The top three in India, England, Australia. They're way ahead of everybody else, and I don't think that's good for the game. So, I think also with the fast changing pace of the world and T20 cricket and the league, South Africa couldn't afford to be left behind anymore. And the mistakes it's made in the past needed to be turned around. I think that we've now got a product that can be built into the future, both commercially and from a cricket perspective. I think. From a cricket perspective, I truly believe in South Africa that SA20 will bring new hope to a lot of cricketers, to a lot of the youngsters looking at the game now. And that is something that we really want to do. We want to put 50 to 80 cricketers every year on the map, and develop more talent that then can go into the international game, and hopefully keep South Africa strong. So, commercial is a very important part of the project, but from a cricket perspective, we need to revive cricket in South Africa, and I truly believe that SA20 is going to do that.
Graeme, actually, this is when you were speaking about this, and even when I've been thinking about this for a while now, that in so many ways, you talk about the domestic talent coming out of South Africa. From the perspective of domestic talent, from the kind of for the kind of domestic circuit that South Africa has at its disposal, for the kind of T20 talent that the country has been dishing out, across season after season, right? And you spoke how important it is for the future of South African cricket. That the time zone, the way Cricket South Africa caters to time zones across the world, which is primarily the Asian prime time, the Indian subcontinent prime time. I think when I look at all these, aspects and put them together, outside of IPL, I think it's only the South African League which actually, comes a full circle in ticking all these boxes. There's some things that were naturally in place for South Africa to actually come and begin something like this. I mean, it was at an inflection point already. I mean, someone just had to step forward and take advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, surely that it was tried a few times, but it wasn't managed well. So I think it's important to get a couple of the important building blocks in place before you go. And I think we managed to do that this time around, and then to attract the type of team owners and partners that we did. I mean, 6 of the biggest franchises in the game. and the experience and the expertise that they will bring on both a business and a cricketing side is just terrific. And it really does set up SA20 well. And you're right. I mean, South Africa is perfectly placed in from a world sort of time zone, to attract a global audience. It's got a really strong cricketing fan base that's can't wait to be revived. The stadiums are some of the best stadiums in the world. And Trini, what we want to see, and for us as a league and everyone working in the operations side, we want to deliver something special. And then it's up to the players. Then hopefully the talking points will be the crowd experiences, watching the game, those hat tricks or that tight game that we all talk about. That's what then it's up to the players. So let's hope that all works out to the levels that we've seen all around the world, and we truly believe it can. I think the energy around South African players now with SA20 around the corner, you can feel the excitement, and they know there's a big opportunity coming.
And hopefully the so-called jinx I'm sorry, I said hopefully the so-called jinx will be broken soon.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was a part of a few semi-finals in my time, so I'm hoping that we can develop the young talent, expose them to all these moments that next time they get into a semi-final, we'll be in the final.
Graeme, I was very curious to understand from you. You're talking very candidly about how South Africa has kind of fallen back as far as some of the other big cricketing countries are concerned. Could you just share, according to you, from everything that you've seen over the last 20 years, why is that? Why did you think South Africa fell back?
Oh, I think it's just been a number of things. I think just, unfortunately, a couple of, bad admin decisions, taking your eye off the ball in terms of what's important, and losing focus on, putting the game of cricket first. I think, unfortunately, that just spreads right throughout the system. The small things aren't done well. South Africa's still producing talent, but I just, unfortunately, it just hasn't translated into success. And I think that the leadership certainly at the top of the game needs to get stronger. The products need to get stronger. If your domestic products are weak, the gap between international and domestic just grows. And the step up is so massive. I think for us, what one thing that we want to make sure is that like India, I mean, just look at the amount of talent that India, I mean, you're putting out two squads of serious quality there. I mean, yes, everyone's disappointed didn't win the World Cup. I mean, that's natural. But I mean, you just look at the performances and the type of players that India are turning out now. I mean, if we can give the selectors of the South African team, 25 to 40 players that are of serious quality, then it's a game changer. It's unheard of to look at a South African Test batting lineup and not one batter is averaging 40. I mean, I remember back to the time that I played, I think we had four that were close to or averaging 50 or close to averaging 50. So, that just says that there's something not right and we need to turn it around.
But is there not a concern that the format of T20 is taking over? You're talking about Test cricket and where South African Test cricket was. But today there is a concern that, everything is being usurped by T20 cricket.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting debate. I mean, I think over the next 6 to 8 years, we'll all have our ideas of where we think the game's going to go. I think for years now, I've heard people saying Test cricket's going to die. But, the minute you have two nations playing each other that are competitive, people tune in. They want to watch it. It's enthralling. The problem is with Test cricket is, and with all due respect, if a Bangladesh is playing a Zimbabwe, it doesn't attract the same sort of crowd attendance, the same viewership, the same interest. But, you turn on an Ashes or an India, South Africa or England, people want to watch it. So I think the dynamic of T20 is certainly growing. Franchise leagues are certainly growing. That's something we can't fault. Look at the ICC; they become very event-based as well. We have a world event every year now, so you can see the sort of direction that cricket is moving. But I still believe that playing for your country will still always be sort of the main thing. It's just how that ends up happening.
And the fact that, Graeme, numbers don't lie. Numbers tell a story. And when we're talking about consumption and how a sport in whichever format it is being consumed, the numbers are there to tell how the consumption is happening. And in that, the T20 leagues, especially from an IPL perspective, the last 15 years have been telling the story. So here's what I want to ask you. The narrative of the game, and those who are holding the narrative of the game, right, and the gatekeepers of the game who probably kind of script that narrative from time to time, are they moving at the pace at which the sport itself is moving? In that, is there a gap there? The pace at which the game is evolving, how it is being consumed, what exactly is the fan expecting from the format, how cricket is probably developing, that vis-a-vis how the narrative of the game is going forward, and how the commentators of the game, the social commentators of the game, are narrating the progress. Is there a gap there? And in that, do you think lies some sort of a deficit?
Yeah, I mean, look, I can only speak from, it's easier for me to speak from a South African perspective, but I think you've kind of touched on a very relevant point there, Shrini. It's just that, you sometimes take the game for granted and you don't stay up with the pace of where it's moving, what fans want, the type of cricketers you need to be producing. And I think that's kind of, South African cricket has just stagnated naturally with some bad decision making, some bad leadership, into a place where it's kind of now, okay, well, we're behind. How do we change it? And the international game also, leadership at that level needs to be aware, needs to stay on top of things. These are the type of conversations that need to be happening with the right type of people, because otherwise, you do get people that are motivated, that want to, like us at SA20, we want to build something great. We want to be the biggest league outside India, and that'll change the game. It will, because you can move fast, you can make a big impact, you attract the right type of partners, and you can move and change the game, and that's something that we want to do.
Can I ask you, Graeme, as a former cricketer, do you feel that today's cricketers are indeed facing a lot of pressure, where they're either having to prioritize a format or even T20 leagues over their country contracts? I mean, there's a lot of talk from players themselves about how packed the calendar is and how much demand there is for them non-stop. What do you feel about that, and about how current cricketers are handling that?
Yeah, look, I think no one plays more than India.
Exactly.
Watch the Indian team and think, wow, I mean, and now, I mean, it's the most, for any nation around the world, having India tours is the most attractive. It's commercially, it just changes the game for so many other countries. So now you're seeing two teams churning out. India playing an ODI series in Sri Lanka, and the teams in test teams somewhere else, and it's just the way of the game. I think what's happened is also post-COVID. There's so many of these series that need to be made up, and boxes ticked for broadcast commercial stuff. You look at those 3 ODIs post the World Cup. It just didn't have any relevance or meaning for England, or and it has to get done, but it just doesn't have that same impact on the world game that it should. So, those things need to be managed. We need to be providing context for everything that we do, certainly in bilateral cricket. And I think that'll keep the game strong. The minute, you've got to throw in, like South Africa's got 3 ODIs in the end of January, that it's a makeup from when COVID started in December, when they had to go back to the UK. It just, as the team arrives, they're there for 4 days, 5 days, play 3 ODIs, and they move on to New Zealand and play a test series. And, the fans get lost in that moment. So how do you create the content, the relevance, that every time you watch, besides being a fan of your team, that it actually means something to you? And I think that's something that the sort of bilateral cricket in the world game needs to think about.
We've got one viewer question coming in for you, Graeme. And I was in Australia actually for the T20 World Cup, and I did notice it, barring some of the big games, and of course for some of the Asian teams, the attendance was low. And I think one of our viewers is asking about how post-World T20 also there's been a dip in getting people to the venues. Is that a concern, and is there something that you're doing particularly to ensure that people actually turn up?
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that, and I think that speaks to my previous comments about relevance. I think after a T20 World Cup, to have 3 random ODIs against England, the public spoke. They were, they didn't want to spend their money. They weren't interested. They'd probably blown the budget on buying tickets from the ICC for the World Cup, and that showed in the 3 ODIs. I think it's in the modern world. I mean, outside the subcontinent where cricket is just so fanatical, and I don't think anyone in India has ever had to worry about a crowd attendance. But for us in the rest of the world, people have lots of other things that they can do. There's lots of they're not as fanatical, say, as the Indian fan. And you can go to wine farms, you can go to the beach. There's other things on TV. There's lives are busy, so you need to create a product that will attract people. And it is a big area of focus for us. Is how for the first time ever we're going to have 33 games over a 4 or 5 week period. Almost back to back, and those weekday games when people have finished work and school. How do you get them into the stadiums? And yeah, that's something that we spend a lot of time talking about. So you obviously got to create a product, and the cricket's got to be at a level that people want to be a part of it, that they want to be there, that they want to go watch their heroes, and have a really great in-stadium fan experience. When they're in there, the music's great, it's fun, it's entertainment, it's they're happy to bring their kids. Even things like the toilet is decent. You just those little things all up to creating an experience for the fan that is crucial to keeping them loving the game of cricket.
Yeah.
Graham, hearing you talk, one of the most wonderful things is how vocal you've been about some of the most relevant subjects, which actually have been, central to how cricket has evolved over the years. But yet again, nobody's actually spoken about it, in public and so openly the way you have. For example, the way you spelt out the compulsions behind not going to Australia and what was at stake for Cricket South Africa at home to build their home season. And then, you have gone through the pain of having to explain how important it was. It has always been rather, for South Africa to build that home season. And now you're, of course, you're close to, kind of building something around that and stuff. But, hasn't this been the bone of, the central piece to all that's connecting bilateral cricket, or rather how cricket is, being perceived across the world? The home season, and when you talk about how much relevant cricket and contextual cricket is happening around the world, the answer lies here, right? I mean,
yeah, it does. And Srini, other people obviously, not everyone is up to date on some of the sort of commercial business side of the sport, and it's easy to say. I mean, you look at countries that are financially, very reliant on the ICC, the level that they're playing at and what they can do is very different to kind of the top teams. And this 3-test series now, I mean, I did it, I played it. I mean, it's incredible to play in Melbourne and Sydney on Boxing Day and New Year's. I mean, it's one of the great cricketing experiences, but it actually costs Cricket South Africa money to be there. They're not in their home country over their summer. They don't earn a cent now over this summer, which is, the most important time of the year for their fans, for the broadcasters, for the sponsors, and they're going to be in Australia. And that's great for the game of cricket. I mean, people will love to experience that and watch it. I mean, I'll never forget winning in 2008. Beating Australia at the MCG, the first time we ever won since readmission. It was just incredible. But, you conquered that massive thing, but actually the business of cricket suffered. So I think it's incredible that South Africa does that, its ability to leave during its home summer. But, eventually there comes a point where you've got to say, listen, I've got to put myself first here. I've got to prioritize the game in my own country. We've got to start, shifting the narrative and getting it right. And I think that's where the discussion came over those ODIs. And I feel for Paletsi and Cricket South Africa. I know the effort they made with Cricket Australia. They really went out of their way to try and find a solution to make sure that content happened. But these things need to be reciprocal, and it wasn't at the time.
Right. And Graham, there's also a flip side to this. Like, while a country tries its best to have what is good for them, right, which is having a good home season and, ensuring that there's quality cricket to look forward to for home fans. There is also a flip side to this where there is adding pressure, where there is continuous pressure to keep your bilateral relations. Because at the end of the day, whatever is happening, around the league, even if in terms of what you're planning at home, you still need your bilateral relations intact for other countries who have that relation where they're going to come and participate. So again, this is all about walking a tightrope as an administrator from time to time, right?
It is.
I'll add to it
I
that you're
think,
doing a great job.
yeah, thank you. It is all about relationships and managing that. But I don't think you can, also the narrative needs to get put right. That's the important thing. The narrative is South Africa's prioritizing this and giving up that, and but it's not. And I think that every nation has an element of putting themselves first and maximizing their own home summer and their own commercial sustainability. And South Africa needed to do that. But Shrini, you're 100% spot on. It's about getting on a plane, going to see each other, have that honest conversation face to face, building that relationship, because the world game needs each other as well. I mean, I keep saying, no one wants to see only 3 teams playing each other in world cricket. We want to have a competitive 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 team bilateral World Cup, whatever it's going to be. I mean, some of the minnows in T20 cricket, you can see, how they're improving. There was lots of upsets in this World Cup, like the Football World Cup as well. And it's great. It's terrific talking points. And, we want to see the world game getting stronger. I don't think cricket's ever going to be like football, where it's going to have 20, 30, 40 strong nations playing the game. It's going to be reliant on 7 to 10 potentially that's going to keep it strong. And it's important that doesn't get less.
Interesting. Very interesting what you're saying, Graeme. And I think one of the things I'll take forward from this conversation with you is about the relevance of what each country is playing, the context of bilateral cricket. I think that's a fabulous point. Instead of more and more and more and more and a few ODIs and a few matches here and there needs to be a context to what 2 teams are doing together. I think that's a fabulous point. I do want to end on this note, but with your thoughts about the future of SA20. Do you believe that the SA20 can rival some of the more established T20 leagues, the IPLs, the Big Bashes, etc.?
I think, well, listen, we never going to rival the IPL, Shivani. I mean, let's just put that out there. I think, no one's going to compete with that. I mean, what it's done in 15 years is just mental. I mean, it's brilliant. And having been a part of it as a player and on the media side, I love being there. It's incredible for the game and how it's changed people's lives as well. I mean, as a cricketer, it changed our lives. And I'll never forget that first auction. I think I was on tour in Bangladesh, when it unfolded. No one knew what to expect. And arriving here and that final in 2008, trying to get into that stadium. I mean, it was incredible. I truly believe that we have an opportunity in South Africa with on time zones, the cricketing culture, the fan base that's needing to be revived, that loves the game, and the natural talent that we produce and lucky to produce. I think we have an opportunity with the type of partners that we've attracted to really build the biggest league outside India. I think we truly have that opportunity, and it's in our hands. And hopefully people will tune in and enjoy it. And the type of cricket conversations we can have after season 1 will hopefully be. I look forward to joining the show again, and we can talk about some of those talking points. But my pressure is to make sure that it happens on Jan 10th. So that's what we're working hard every day.
If the bravest cricketer we know is making an effort, I'm sure there's going to be some difference.
Thanks,
Absolutely. We wish you all the very best, and we'll take you up on that. We'll get you back after the end of the SA20 inaugural season and just talk about the learnings and the successes. And we wish you all the greatest success in the league, especially on field, because what happens on field is exactly what's going to determine the future of the league. So let's hope all the players enjoy themselves and there's great action to watch, Graeme.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to catching up soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Graeme. And Shrini, and goodbye to our viewers on that note. Shrini, that was a very candid chat with Graeme, isn't it? Speaks very candidly.
Yes, and I think he's been, ever since he's come on board, to take over the responsibilities of this league, he's been phenomenal in terms of little things and how he's been vocal about it, right? I mean, for example, how he spoke about, not going to Australia to do what was important for South Africa to do at home. I think because been a talking point for the longest time, but no administrators actually come and been vocal about it. And we've seen
Hmm.
someone like Graham with the kind of standing that he has in the game itself, having played it. I think it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal to have him as an administrator.
Yeah, and I think it's important to have a realistic visions, and I think that also came out as far as Graham talking about the hopes and successes of the SA20 is concerned. But let's just wait and see how that goes. Srini, pleasure catching up with you this morning, and with somebody like Graeme Smith, who was a fantastic batsman and captain to watch, especially in Test cricket. We'll take that conversation forward about the pressure that Test cricket, for example, feels with a lot of these new T20 leagues coming in, and they're just coming up more and more. And I'm just sitting here and wondering, Srini, when is the time we're going to see an actual, battle of the T20 league champions take place again? I'm just wondering about that because there's so many of these leagues now. Their champions should compete against each other, isn't it? I think that's just waiting to happen. But we'll take that conversation forward some other time, Srini.
Yes, it's a very valid point you make, Shivani, and I guess
Hmm.
it calls for another show. So
It calls for another show. We'll save that for another day. I do thank our viewers for joining in. That's all from us. Thanks a lot for tuning in.
thank you so much for your time.